presentation from staff, and there's other matters to deal with on that, so I'm going to pull that matter. Are there any other matters that councillors wish to pull? All right, I just need a mover and seconder on the balance of the items. Moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any comments on the balance of the consent items other than item 2.2? Councillor Morgan, go ahead. Or Deputy Mayor Morgan, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. There is one item. It refers to 1196 Sunningdale Road West, which is item 2.4. For colleagues' context, earlier this year, Planning Committee heard a lot of information about a very, very busy school with a lot of portables. This development is immediately beside that, and in fact, will, when it starts, provide access into other neighborhoods that turn what is a dead end that ends at a very busy school into a potential through street, which I anticipate will be very busy. Should there be any special discussions with the developer to help them prepare for what will be probably an oddly high amount of flow through a what will be a non-city owned developing subdivision? I don't know if staff have had any conversations with it, but if they haven't, I certainly would like to flag it for them at this time to say that developer should be well prepared for additional traffic likely trying to navigate through that, because the school is very, very busy when school is in.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Sorry, Ms. Wise, are you going to make the presentation on the Masonville secondary plan?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm ready to make that presentation.
Great, go ahead then.
Thank you. The final Masonville secondary plan is being introduced tonight to begin a period of review and circulation prior to the plan adoption, which is scheduled later in October with a public participation meeting. The Masonville secondary plan project began in January of 2019 to provide more specific direction for the area than the parent policies in the London plan, and to be more proactive about managing local development interest and growth. Since the kickoff, planning staff have undertaken numerous consultation events, both in person and then virtually, with the community and interested parties to establish the direction, principles, and priorities for the secondary plan. In March of this year, a draft plan was brought forward for review and to receive input on the policies. A wide variety of thoughtful comments, input, and suggestions were received, and the final Masonville secondary plan that is before you tonight is the product of the refinement and revision of the draft plan over the past few months. From here, I'll be referencing certain elements of the community structure plan, which can be found on page 91 of the agenda or page 67 of the actual Masonville secondary plan itself. At a high level, some of the major highlights of the Masonville secondary plan include a focus on mobility and moving around. So a series of new connections have been identified throughout the plan area. They're shown as hatched lines in the community structure plan. These are intended to decrease the block size and increase permeability, to provide better delineated spaces for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists, and also to serve as green corridors that provide new spaces for tree planting and stormwater retention. The plan integrates growth with transit, so it recognizes the existing bus interchange as a hub that provides excellent transit services citywide, as well as the potential of future transit improvements, and focuses the areas of highest development potential nearest to the station. Those are areas shown in red, as well as ensuring there is a commercial ground floor presence along prominent streetscapes. Those are areas shown in blue, to promote activity and ensure there's a walkable Main Street environment. The plan addresses neighborhood transition. So within the plan area, there are existing low-rise residential neighborhoods. Those are shown as yellow. They represent areas of sensitivity and also stability. The plan allows for mid-rise areas shown in orange, adjacent and near the low-rise areas to provide transition to the high-rise areas and a more sensitive development form overall. Modeling for future development scenarios based on the proposed land uses and intensities has shown that the minimum targets that were recently approved by the province for protected major transit station areas like Masonville can be achieved by the policies and permissions set out in the secondary plan. The projections that were undertaken for new residents and workers is also associated with new green spaces, and there are three new parks identified within the secondary plan. Those are shown as green stars, and they will provide recreation areas and open spaces for residents, workers, and visitors, and contribute to achieving a more balanced community overall. So from here, the final Masonville secondary plan is now available for review, comment, and input. There will be a public participation meeting scheduled in mid-October, and that will be for the plan adoption at that time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to take any questions.
I know Councillor Cassidy, I don't know what it is with me in my microphone today. Since there's no questions, I know there's a motion that was circulated today by Councillor Cassidy. So why don't we see if we can get that moved and seconded and have a discussion about that? Moved by Councillor Lewis. Is there a seconder for that?
I just want to update the motion. I have more information from staff about my motion.
Oh, okay, that's great then. So what, before then you move the motion, why don't you do that, Councillor, and then we'll know what we're moving.
So thank you very much for recognizing me, and it's strange to be in committee as a member of council and not chairing a committee all alone in the room with the clerk. I just wanted to say that I had circulated the motion, and it was specific to a street that is just outside of the secondary plan area, and it's called Fawn Court, and it's a little dead-end street. And right now that there is a landscaped berm and a wooden fence that was part of a development agreement back in 1987, that this berm and fence would be maintained to provide a buffer between the commercial area and this small street called Fawn Court. So on having further conversations with staff, they've suggested some alternative wording for the motion that I had circulated earlier. And I was very specific in my motion about the existing buffer zone, the existing fence and berm. And the alternative wording is that any future redevelopment of 109 Fanshawe Park Road should provide enhanced buffering, screening, and landscaping along the western boundary of the site at Fawn Court. So that's what they're suggesting to simplify my wording. And then also I had a part B that talked about a pedestrian and cycling connection. In the original part of the plan, the pathway connection that staff were proposing would have gone right into Fawn Court. And the residents of Fawn Court had concerns about that. And also Fawn Court is outside of the secondary plan area. So staff said, rather than my wording, just leave out leave out that wording and remove the connection in its entirety because they don't want to complicate that idea, and they don't also want to create concerns about that the CPTED principles, which is crime prevention through engineering and design. So their suggestion to me was just take the connection out in its entirety and simplify the wording around the berm and the landscaping. So city clerks have the wording that was proposed by city staff, and if Councillor Lewis is okay with that,
Staff saying they don't have it.
You don't? Okay, I can email that to you then. I thought Councillor Hopkins had emailed it to you, but I can do that, and I thank the committee for their consideration.
All right, so we have a new motion that's going to be on the floor, and you're prepared to move that, Councillor Lewis. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hopkins is seconding it. All right, discussion on the motion, and we can start, and it's going to be circulated, I assume. Go ahead, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the councillor for these suggestions. I know when we had the public participation meeting a number of months ago, and I'm pretty sure it was with this committee, this was raised as a concern from residents on Fawn Court. So I know the concerns that they had there. I did circulate the changes that were suggested with further consultation with staff. To the Heather Lizinski. I'm not sure if she's there at the moment, but if she could look for that. If not, like the councillor said, she's going to pass on the suggested amendments. And I'm happy to second these changes because it is a concern. I think it really definitely speaks to the that the fact that it is outside of the boundary as well. So I'm hoping the committee can support this. I'm happy to see this secondary plan go forward, and glad to hear that in October we'll be having a future public participation meeting as well to finalize the plan. It's been going on for a number of years, and very happy to support the changes that the councillor of the ward is suggesting, and move forward with the plan. So thank you to staff for all the work as well.
Councillor Morgan? Deputy Mayor Morgan, sorry,
That's okay. Hopefully I come across smoother this time. I apologize for before. So I think I understand exactly what the councillor is doing, given I've been part of the discussions of the Masonville secondary plan all the way along. And I think that this is a good reflection of taking the community's feedback from that area and turning it into something that doesn't fundamentally change the plan in any sort of significant way, but allows for yet another way to, just like on my side of Richmond Street, there are provisions where we're stepping down the height into the community. I think this is another example of another way that the community, with an existing arrangement and perception and history of their neighborhood, allows for us to make a modification that reflects the character of that community, and essentially stepping down, although it's not height in this case, the plan into that community. So I'm supportive of this, and I don't see any reason not to allow the councillor to make this change for her community.
thank you. Any further comments on the amendment? Councillor Cassidy, did you want to say anything about your amendment?
Thank you, Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead.
I just want to say thank you to staff. They've done some really good work here. So like about 3 years ago, right about this time, maybe a little bit later in the year, there was a walkabout in the area. Community members went out and city staff pointed out the areas where there were concerns and what they wanted to see addressed through this secondary plan. And residents have come a really long way from first viewing the secondary plan as an invitation to an enormous amount of development in the area, and have really come to understand what a secondary plan is all about. And it's about protection for those lower residential areas. And also, this is a highly urban area with a lot of asphalt, a lot of cars, a lot of roadways. And to see 3 new parks being proposed in this area will be really welcomed by the community in general. There's been a lot of hard work and a lot of public engagement, and I think the best part is that the residents will be able to see in this final draft how their input has been not only valued but implemented in the plan. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to Ms. Wise and to Britt O'Hagan as well for all of the hard work that they've done over these years on this, and I'm really happy to see it going through. And thank you so much to the committee as well for supporting this amendment.
Thank you. Any further comments on the amendment? All right, it's on the screen, and Clerk, you wanted to say something about the amendment?
I just wanted to apologize to Councillors Hopkins and Councillors Cassidy. I did receive the revised amendment and thought it was the same as the original amendment, so my sincerest apologies.
Yeah, I'm sure they understand, and they weren't looking for an apology, but as usual, you insisted on doing it, so that's fine, but we understand. So I'll just call the vote on the amendment.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All right, then we will have to amended motion. Moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any discussion? I'll call the vote on the amended recommendation.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
The scheduled item, 3.1, is a delegation from the Environmental and Ecological Planning Advisory Committee from Mr. Levin, who is present. And it's not to be before 4:30, but so luckily we had a delay, so corporate services should not feel so bad now. And we're ready to hear from you, Mr. Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have 3 items from the EPAC report to discuss with you. One is item 2.1 on our agenda, the homeowner information brochure. This also relates to item number 6 on your deferred list. I want to thank Mr. Page for working with a group of students from Fanshawe to do some preliminary investigation work, which identifies London is a leader in this area. And in the spirit of continuous improvement, EPAC has set up a working group to come back with some recommendations to your committee on how London can do even better in this area, particularly as we've seen many of our environmentally significant areas used and perhaps even overused during COVID. Moving on to item 4.1 on our report, the Climate Emergency Action Plan. You'll note we have a number of recommendations. So again, I want to thank Mr. Stanford for asking specifically for EPAC's input on the draft. And I understand Mr. Stanford is at the meeting and he has seen these comments ahead of time. What EPAC is looking for, Mr. Chair, is sometime before, ideally, our next meeting in September 23rd, a quick response in terms of what are doable recommendations in the immediate, midterm, and long term, and which are frankly not going to happen. Believe also you would like to know as well from Mr. Stanford when the next draft of the Climate Emergency Action Plan is coming. So I'll pause. I don't know if Mr. Stanford has comments at this stage for the committee.
Mr. Stanford?
Hello, good afternoon, and through the chair, thanks very much, Sandy, Mr. Levin, for these comments. What is really important here, if I may, is that the perspective that's come back from EPAC is one about the natural environment. And that has actually been one of the missing ingredients in the engagement process to date. So we're so pleased to receive these. I know that Mike Fabro's on the line and he's been working with EPAC on a number of items related to the natural environment. So what we see here today is something that is very important to us. Now, as you can imagine, we've also received comments from about 3 or 4 other advisory committees. And the engagement process to date has been quite good. We've heard from many, many Londoners and many, many different organizations. We have a lot of work still to do in the next month, pulling together that engagement result, which will be a key part of going forward. So I think you said something along the lines of September 23rd, you're hoping for comments back from staff. We can provide just sort of a high level comment, more along the lines of that. We're very grateful for what has been done here from what I've just mentioned, serving very well the natural environment, and a careful look at the natural environment being part of the solution for our climate emergency and the importance of protecting it and in fact in further investing in that. Your other question about when will we be bringing forward the next portion of the Climate Emergency Action Plan, we are currently targeting the SPPC meeting in late November. How much will be brought forward at that point will be very important to us and what we're able to accomplish over the next essentially 2 months. But our goal is to have a very strong portion of our document done and available for that particular meeting. If we can get it complete, we will. So, Mr. Chair, I will leave the comments at that for right now and happy to respond to anything else that comes forward.
Thank you. Mr. Levin?
And finally, item 5.1 on our report, Mr. Chair, just to kind of prod this a bit. This relates to London's Bird-Friendly Skies program. And it was an initiative that EPAC, working with Development Services, began. And I know Ms. McNeely's group at the time was leading the charge. I know between COVID and other matters, it's kind of slowed down a bit. What EPAC is hoping for is that at least before the end of the term of EPAC committee, it would have an opportunity to at least move this initiative forward again. I note it's not on the deferred list, and we are a little concerned that it might get lost among all the other items that the council is working on. So perhaps someone from staff can comment on that at this time, or update EPAC directly at a future meeting.
Is someone?
With that, I conclude, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is someone from staff able to comment on that matter?
Mr. Chair, it's Ms. Barrett. I will take Mr. Levin up on his offer, and we'll have a discussion with EPAC at a future meeting.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Levin?
No, that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank
Great.
you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. So do we need a motion on that committee report? Yes, please. All right. So we need, yes, Councillor Hopkins? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to make a few comments, and I would like to bring forward a motion as well that I think I have passed on to you regarding 4.1, which first of all, I want to thank Mr. Levin for coming to PEC, and his delegations are always appreciated in the work that EPAC does as well. So my thanks to EPAC. But my suggestion for 4.1, I really appreciate Mr. Sanford's suggestions as well, that we're going to take these comments in. I would encourage him to, I guess, reach out to EPAC as well to see what is doable and what is not. But to the motion that I would like to bring forward is that we take the recommendations from the working group and forward them on to civic administration to report back at a future SPPC committee meeting. And I'm listing the suggestions all the way from, I guess, A to F. So with that, I'm looking for a seconder to my motion.
Seconded by Councillor Hillier. Okay, comments on this motion? Okay, being none, then I'll just call the vote on it. Okay, we're voting. I don't know who, if we're waiting or. Let's go.
Sorry, Councillor Squire, that's me that you're waiting on.
No problem.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Moving to, which is a public participation meeting with regard to 496 Dundas Street. I just need a motion to open the public participation meeting, moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Hillier. If there's nothing further, I will call the vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
I know there was a presentation from staff on the added agenda, so I would just ask staff to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, my name is Isaac de Kooster, planner for 9347Z, a zoning bylaw application for 496 Dundas Street by applicant Amiraco Properties. The existing zoning on site is an office residential business district commercial pursuant to the City of London zoning bylaw. The 1989 official plan designation is a Main Street commercial corridor. The site is designated as an urban corridor in the London plan and is part of the Old East Village Dundas Street Corridor secondary plan. It should be recognized that the Old East Village Dundas Street Corridor secondary plan is in force with a site-specific policy 3.3.1i for the site that takes precedence over the London plan, which in turn is in force for this site and takes precedence over the 1989 official plan. The subject site is located on the north side of Dundas Street, mid-block between Maitland Street and William Street. This site, which is rectangular in shape, measures approximately 0.33 hectare in area, has approximately 40 meters of frontage along Dundas Street and an approximate depth of 82 meters. As you can see in the pictures on the slide deck, the subject site includes a vacant two-story commercial building constructed in 1949. The applicant is proposing a high-rise tower containing 170 units, including 133 square meter commercial space on the ground floor, 136 underground parking spaces, and an additional 17 surface parking spaces will be provided, as well as bike storage. The applicant requested an amendment to the zoning bylaws set 1 for 496 Dundas Street to change the zoning from a business district commercial office residential to a site-specific business district commercial special provision zone to permit a mix of uses, including 170 residential units, amenity space, and commercial space on the ground floor. The applicant requested the following 4 special provisions: permit a site-specific maximum building height of 57 meters, reduce the off-street parking requirement to 153 spaces, prescribe a maximum residential density of 530 units per hectare, and reduce the interior side yard setback to 0 meters. For the first issue, use and intensity, I will quickly highlight that the site is in proximity to LTC bus stops, anticipated rapid transit, and existing cycling infrastructure on Dundas Street. The proposed development is consistent with key directions for infill and intensification and achieves a compact form of development, growing our city inwards and upwards. The proposed mixed-use redevelopment conforms with the urban corridor framework and Main Street segment of this place type. The next issue, build form. As mentioned, the Old East Village Dundas Street Corridor secondary plan provides a site-specific policy that permits a maximum building height of 16 stories, subject to a height transition within a 45-degree angular plane, and build form policies contained in the high-rise form policies of the secondary plan. Just as a little bit of background, this site-specific policy is the result of an LPAT decision in March 2020. The LPAT decision was a resolution between the applicant and the City of London to recognize the existing stories of the existing zoning of 16 stories. And finally, for heritage, the site is adjacent to 4 listed and 1 designated heritage property. The complete application included a heritage impact assessment and a stage 1 archaeological assessment. The HIA concluded that there is a limited cultural heritage impacts associated with the proposal. However, there are potential impacts for land disturbances to the coach house at 507 Queens Avenue to the north and the northeast wing of Dundas Street Center United Church to the west. The following measures were recommended in the HIA to mitigate the potential impacts: a temporary protection plan, TPP, with a vibration monitoring plan and certification by an engineer that the foundation will be constructed in a way that avoids damage to the coach house, and a landscape buffer along the rear to provide additional buffering with the mature neighborhood. Ledge is satisfied with the research, assessment, and conclusion of the HIA and supports the mitigation and conservation recommendations outlined. That brings me to my conclusion. Staff is recommending approval of the requested amendment to the zoning bylaw to change the zoning from business district commercial office residential to a site-specific business commercial special provision BDC D350 H57 zone. The proposal facilitates the redevelopment of a vacant site and provides a mix of land uses to support residential intensification, regeneration, and compact and efficient forms of growth. The recommended amendment to permit a site-specific maximum building height of 57 meters is in keeping with the site-specific permitted heights in the Old East Village Dundas Street Corridor Secondary Plan, subject to the angular plane and built form conditions. The amendment is also consistent with the London Plan Direction and Council's Climate Change Emergency Declaration, as the proposed development is in an area conducive to alternative transportation, uses existing municipal services and infrastructure, and assists with reducing emissions by reducing the on-site parking. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. It's Scott Allen from MHBC Planning.
Go ahead.
Thank you. We're acting on behalf of the applicant. And with me today are several members of our project team who are available to answer any questions. At this time, we'd like to express our support for the findings and recommendations of the Development Services Report as presented by Mr. DeCuster. In particular, we agree that the findings that this redevelopment proposal represents appropriate intensification and promotes a compact urban form, and that we agree that the intended high-rise tower would broaden housing choice in the community and help enhance the overall vitality of the Dundas Street corridor. Additionally, we agree that the design elements of this plan align with the directions set out in the city's official plans and the Dundas secondary plan. And we also agree that the project should integrate effectively with the local development context. The findings of the planning analysis presented in the staff report also reflect commentary presented in the MHBC planning and design report submitted as part of this application. In closing, Mr. Chair, we'd like to thank city staff for their attention to this application. With approval of this proposed zoning bylaw amendment, the applicant intends to proceed with the detailed design phase of the project and progress the proposal through the site plan approval process. Thank you for your consideration, and we'll gladly answer any questions committee members may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any technical questions for either the staff or the applicant? There being none. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Lehman. Once again, I never look left.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, can staff confirm for me that the first floor will be commercial with this rezoning request?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. I can confirm that the ground floor will consist of both commercial space and residential units. Thank you.
Okay. Nothing further then. We will go to public comments. Is there any members of the public? In the committee room. Great.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Rumsey, R-U-M-S-E-Y. I do live within the close proximity of the proposed high-rise. I'd like to say at the outset, I've never been a tenant of York Developments, and I've never done any business with them. But I wanted to come today. I've walked past that empty unit for several years now, and I noticed the application, I noticed the information in the London Free Press, and I'm here to support the development. I think it would be an improvement to our neighborhood. With concerns to parking, I know that the city have spent a great deal of money, not only with the buses, but also with the bike lanes. And I don't think a developer should be held to 10 or 15 years ago when we had all these large parking lots. That's pretty much it. From what I've heard and what I can tell in the neighborhood, it's supported, and they appreciate York Development's stepping forward and taking it from a vacant facility that has seen some vandalism lately. And I hope it proceeds according to plan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? There appears not to be any, so thank you very much. So I just need a motion to close the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Lewis. If there's nothing further, I will call the vote on that.
Deputy Mayor Morgan, please. Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Was raised to me was, I know the church next door was concerned about damage occurring to the church, and I know there was some talk about protection against that in terms of vibration, but I just wonder if the applicant could talk about that a little bit, because it was specifically addressed as a concern from the church.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to call on Rachel Redshaw, our heritage planner, who's also in attendance, to respond to that with respect to the recommendation in her report.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Rachel Redshaw. I'm a heritage planner with MHBC, and I wrote the HIA. So as part of the temporary protection plan, as mentioned, we recommended a vibration monitoring plan. So that plan will be completed by an acoustic engineer. And so he looks at zone of influence, and he'll be able to, so it is a technical analysis, and he'll be able to see what type of vibration the church will experience during the construction period. And then from that, he will implement the plan if he deems that there will be issues with vibration. And he does that by placing monitors in different areas. So if it goes beyond a certain vibration, the construction will stop. And then they'll have to remediate whatever the issue is that's causing the vibration. And there'll be a fence along there as well. So in terms of any accidental damages or anything from construction equipment, that will be there as a precaution as well.
Thank you very much. Any other questions before we go to any further? Councillor Hopkins, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I know the councillor from the ward is here as well. I'm interested in his comments, but I do have a quick question through you about the buffering on that side of where the heritage property is. If staff could just expand a little bit more on what additional buffering means.
Go ahead, staff, and then if the applicant wants to add to that, that would be fine, I think.
Thank you. I don't have any specifics for the buffering, as this will be part of the site plan application, but perhaps we can go to the applicant to see if they have any additional details.
Thank you. This is on the buffering. Applicant?
Yeah, through the chair, and the HIA, we recommended a buffer and being a landscape buffer. So some kind of vegetation to sort of create a buffer between both neighborhoods, the historic part and sort of the variety that you see along Dundas Street. And then the vegetation, use of vegetation as it's more aesthetically pleasing. And so that was part of our recommendation in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Helmer?
Thank you. And this is actually just across Adelaide in Councillor Kayabaga's ward in Ward 13. But she did ask me while she was away on her leave of absence to handle inquiries about this particular proposal. I will say I put the folks from the United Church in touch with Peter Kokoris as the chief building official and our heritage planners and also the architects for the building. So make sure they can resolve those issues around vibration. I think that's their main concern. They've also indicated they're quite interested in seeing revitalization and growth happen in this area. They just want to make sure it doesn't damage their awesome heritage building. And I just wanted to pass that on. I appreciate Councillor Squire, you raising those concerns to get the answers they were looking for. That was great.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, we'll just go to comments and any motions. Go ahead, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be happy to move this motion. And I want to thank the public for coming out. It's great to hear positive feedback on applications coming into neighborhoods with this kind of intensification. I know is always a challenge, but I do appreciate the comments coming out of the importance of eyes on the street and how we vitalize this area. I'm a big supporter of having intensification in these areas, especially around rapid transit. And I want to thank staff for the work with the mitigation that's going to, and the monitoring that's going to go forward with the Heritage church next to this development. And I guess all I could say is this would be better if we probably had some affordable housing in here, but I'm very pleased to see this coming forward.
Someone prepared to second the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Any further discussion? I will be taping Mr. Rumsey's comments to help me sleep at night, so I'm hoping if anyone else wants, you can let me know. Anything further? I'll just call the vote.
Councillor Hillier, please.
I vote yes, it's not coming up.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
For direction, item 4.1 is the 6th report of the Trees and Forests Advisory Committee. I don't think there's anything other than we have to receive and file. So I need a motion for that. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Anything further? Then I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And item 4.2, the 8th report of the London Advisory Committee on Heritage. Again, I think that's just to receive and file.
There are actually recommendations.
All right, the recommendations are?
Through the chair, there's a recommendation on the properties located at 40 and 42 Askin Street.
So do we need to move the recommendations?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we just need a motion to move the recommendations made by the London Advisory Committee of Heritage, and Councillor Hopkins is prepared to do that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor or Deputy Mayor Morgan. Any comments on that? I'll call the vote.
Councillor Hopkins, please.
Do we have to receive and file the balance of the report? No.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Deferred matters or additional business. 5.1 is the deferred matters list. Any comments with regard to that? Then we just need to receive and file that. Deferred matters. Anybody, any takers on that? Thank you, Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any comments? Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Only knowing that adjournment is next, I just want to point out that we're 9 times faster than corporate services was today.
You certainly don't think I was going to adjourn this meeting without making some comments. All right, so we'll call the vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
There's no one who can deny the efficiency of the Planning and Environment Committee after today. We're very thrifty with our time. Appreciate it. So I need a mover and seconder for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hillier. And we can do a hand vote. All in favor? Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice evening, and we'll see you, I think, next week at some point. Have a great Labor Day.